I guess nobody's in here yet, but guess I'll give it a minute or so, let people get in here and fill up the live. Not seeing anybody yet, but tonight I have a very, very important live stream, and I have a lot of information to cover. And see, I'm looking to see who's in here, if I can see it, if it'll let me see it. No, nobody yet. Somebody send me a message if the sound quality's good. Something, anything. Can anybody hear me? Oh, looks like I'm losing people. Anyway, I have a very, very good live stream tonight. I have quite a lineup of information to cover, and hopefully people will start filling in the room. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to see you, Data Analyst by Night. Thank you. Welcome. Yes, I see you in there. I have quite a Friday evening lineup for tonight, and I just wanted to make my intro here. I want to thank everybody for coming, and I wanted to say that I have a lot of future projects planned for this channel, such as I wanted to do an actual hypothetical Second American Syrian-style civil conflict by maps, like I did for the invasion maps, but I want to do a hypothetical Second American Syrian-style conflict, and I wanted to do it with maps like I did with my invasion scenarios, but I was going to add every single solitary aspect of it, including diminished resources, various factions fighting over those resources, which areas they hold, and which areas the regime would hold in such a conflict. And I wanted to also do my audio book, my audio story on the invasion, because I've been promising you that a long time. Hey, Jen. Hey, baby. Welcome. Welcome. Oh, and speaking of Jennifer Crocker, she's a lovely lady. I love her very much. If you would please go to her channel and subscribe, that would be wonderful. She's just working out some technical details, but I'm sure she will go and do a live very soon. And I also wanted to people to go over to Soldier for Christ's channel. That's a good friend of mine. His name's Matt, and he's a very good man. He's a fellow Iraq War veteran, and I would like it if people would go over and subscribe to him too. His channel name used to be Yeshua is Coming channel, but he has changed it to Soldier for Christ channel. And basically, in my lineup tonight, I have a myriad of various different topics that I have to cover, because there's a lot of narratives out there that I need to burst through and pop the bubble on, because basically punt kick these narratives, because there's a whole other perspective to these things that people aren't seeing. and me being a amateur professional researcher and world military analyst who analyzes world military affairs, global military affairs, even though I don't believe necessarily it's a globe, but you know what I'm saying. I am a military analyst first and foremost, and I'm an Iraq War combat veteran, as you know, and I'm glad to see everybody here. Hi, All Smiles. Hi, Soldier for Christ. Hey, B-Ran. Hey, everybody. I'm glad you all are here. But anyway, I have a myriad of topics to go through tonight, everybody. Everything from this treaty and its dynamics, to the woke, depleted military that we have currently, to the Davos crowd, to the CCP, to Russia, to Poland vis-a-vis Russia, and the funky box. I'm sure you all know what I mean by funky box. And also the whole China, Taiwan, and invasion goals of the CCP. And also prepping and different ways to prepare, and even in prepping improv, like improvisation, and the whole food crisis, the American Syrian-style civil conflict that's coming, the collapse, limited resources in the West, overreach of Western elites, and my main topic for tonight, when I get to it, is going to be discussion on how, ultimately, Western civilization will end, although not Eastern civilization, and I'm going to build up to that with the aforementioned topics that I've already mentioned in the lineup. So, basically, that's going to include the foreign invasion, the collapse, the Syrian-style conflict, and why, and how all the weaknesses of the West will contribute to such a collapse and a disaster, and how the Great Reset will fail as a result. Although the Great Reset will fail, there will be something else by a different name, and it will be run by Russia and China, and then it'll be co-opted by the Antichrist, the man of sin. Because we know that the 10 kings, after Sino-Russian victory in World War III, will reign for 1 hour with the beast. As it says in the Bible, the 10 kings will reign for 1 hour after with the beast. And also, keep in mind, too, that these 10 kings, they come to power after a great disaster. And the only great disaster that could unify the world would be a World War III. And it's mentioned in the Bible, it's in Ezekiel, it's in Jeremiah with the invasion of Mystery Babylon, USA, that they all come together. And I look at things through the lens of a amateur researcher and military analyst, and I consider myself a professional due to the many hours I've devoted to this, and how I connect dots, and how I see things, and ultimately where my research leads me. And I analyze these things, I put them together in such a way that I make sense of all the various trees, so I can see the forest from the single trees. And that's very, very important if you are looking for truth. You need to be able to see the whole forest from the single trees. And I want to help you all do that. I want to put everything into its correct, proper perspective. And of course, my closing topic will be basic military analysis of facts, figures, stats, numbers, capabilities, and tech, and more. And I'm going to use that to be the final building block in tonight's show, and I'm going to go over why it's important and why it's going to lead to what it's going to lead to. Because ultimately, military issues are one of the biggest end-time issues, and I think everybody understands that. So my goal, as such a researcher, as a combat veteran with combat experience, as the type of analyst I am, my goal is to combine all the information, deliver it in such a way to where all can understand it, to where it's simplified and broken down Barney style, as they used to say in the old army. And I want to put it in such a way that it's understandable by people, and that they can get a grip on it, and that they can understand how to proceed, how they can better prepare and be more effective people. I'm a very strong self-defense advocate, because self-defense, let's be real, it's all over the Bible. And the deniers of Yeshua, such as the Jesuits, preach false messages, like that people should be weaklings and basically cuckolds, and I'm not with all that. That's wrong. That's incorrect. We have to defend ourselves, and we have to stand mighty for our Messiah, Yeshua. So, with all due respect, I'm going to get started, and I'm going to start by talking about our woke, depleted military and its deficiencies and their effects on the current state of affairs. And I'm going to combine that with this whole treaty thing and everything else, the funky box and all of it. So, now, when we talk about the woke, depleted military, we have to understand that their capabilities, their size is not what it once was, okay? Their technology has fallen behind that of Russia and China. And I put an example as the thumbnail, and that is the S-37 Berkut, which has been around since the late 90s. That is a Russian fighter jet. It's stealth, and it's got a lot of other technology in it, and that's been around since the late 90s. That just goes to show you that the Russian and also the Chinese aviation industries are much further ahead of that than the West gives them credit for. In fact, I would say that they're further ahead in their technological developments than even the West is itself. You take, for example, the F-22 Raptor and how the Chinese reverse engineered it and essentially built a copy of it, but they put more advanced features in it, more advanced avionics, more advanced radars, more advanced electronic warfare, so on and so forth. So, they called that the J-31. And it's out, it's being produced. And the Chinese had the J-20, which was an indigenously built stealth aircraft, and that too is on par with anything we have, maybe even surpasses it in some areas. So the Russian Berkut has evolved to become the Su-47, and the Russians also have the MiG-41. I wanted to put the technical stats of the MiG-41 up, but then I thought, you know what? I'll put the S-37 up as the thumbnail because that's a pretty unique looking plane with its forward swept wings. It looks pretty futuristic. So I decided to put that up, because that's a very unique type of aircraft. But I would say that the Su-57, the Su-41, the MiG-41 are also very, very adept aircraft in combat. They're very advanced aircraft. And also the Chinese J-20 and J-31 are very advanced aircraft in stealth and electronic warfare. So anyways, back to the woke depleted military. We have been falling behind. Our F-35 program is a failure. I use that a lot because the F-35 is supposed to be like the be-all, end-all. It's supposed to be made to be able to do everything, but it does nothing well. It does not one single thing well. See, they tried to make it for too many different missions, and thus they made a failure because it doesn't perform well in any of its missions. You need a specialty aircraft that can perform in a single mission. Like you have aircraft designed for ground attack, which are fighter bombers or tactical fighter bomber aircrafts. You have strategic bombers, and you have fighters and interceptors and so on and so forth. Well, they tried to make it for too many things, and then they made a failure because the F-35 is a horrible aircraft. Let's be honest. And also, the Navy, they tried to make the Zumwalt, but that thing has constant engine failures. And, with all the logistical and supply chain problems we have and how dependent we are on foreign products and, finished and resource products, we are having immense trouble with our military industries. Our military industrial complex is falling behind. They can't produce like Russia and China can produce. And surely they're not. they're unable to come out with these new designs in such a way where they can mass produce them effectively. So, that being said, we have to think about the fact that these supply issues are contributing to such issues, and we have to remember how deindustrialized we are, and we also have to take that into account. We cannot mass produce things like we could in World War II. Our stuff is overly complicated, and not in a good way. It's not streamlined. It's overall not effective, and they're finding that out in Ukraine. That was a testing ground for a lot of equipment, and a lot of it has failed utterly because, again, Russia is not, it's not Panama, Grenada, like others have said. It's not Iraq. It's not Afghanistan. No, Russia is a major, major power. Russia is a powerhouse. And China, even more powerful than Russia. China is the world superpower, the world hegemon. So, back to the woke military. They're worried about stress cards. And let me explain what a stress card is. See, back when I was in basic training in the old Army, you had drill sergeants yelling at you and treating you like trash to purposely put you under stress conditions so that to show you how to perform under those conditions. Now they have stress cards, and stress cards are such that the woke military is allowing people to take time out of training, time out of whatever they're doing if they feel stressed out. They hold up their stress card and they're allowed to go to a safe place. Well, in real war, you don't have no safe place to go to. So that's counterproductive, extremely counterproductive. And also, they tore down and gutted our armed forces by purging them. They basically they allowed certain things to be open, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I have to watch how I say things, you guys. I can't, but they allow certain lifestyles to be openly practiced, uh, even including during work hours, and it's total garbage. We have the worst leadership. We have piss poor leaders. We have basically just everything has gone to total trash in the woke military. It's depleted itself. It's sent its stocks abroad to be destroyed by Russia right now. And what little is left, that'll probably get sent off too. And this industrial complex we have is not going to be able to replace it, not easily. If these foreign nations we depend on, which most are enemies, cut us off, then that's it. Then there's nothing. Then it's going to be like Enemy at the Gates, where every other man would get a rifle. I can't even begin to tell you how much stuff was left behind in Afghanistan in terms of small arms and other things. If you look at the amount of M16s that were ever produced, it's something around 8 million. And then when you look at M4s, it's about 1 million. Well, there were hundreds of thousands of these small arms left in Afghanistan when we fled in total disgrace. It was how we left, and it just really embarrassed this whole nation and made us look weak and pathetic. And we have this new woke military. It's a new generation. You have to understand, this is that Call of Duty generation that thinks that wars are going to be like Call of Duty. And they don't understand that real combat is nothing like a video. There's no video game, no comic book, nothing that can do that any sort of justice, okay? So, when you think about this new generation, they're not ready for the hardships because they weren't raised that way. They were raised just in a soft, decadent, weak society. This is the participation trophy generation. This is the entitlement generation. They are not ready for war against a major power, much less a superpower such as China, the superpower, or a major power like Russia. Now, when talking about that, there's this whole, also, we have woke allies in Europe, and speaking of, there's this whole issue about Poland going up against Russia. Well, let me tell you, from what I'm seeing, they only sent in 2 battalions with American weapons and not under their own flag, not under the Polish flag, because Poland's trying to tiptoe in there, and they're trying to do it in such a way that won't aggravate Russia and cause Russia to respond to them. So these could be legitimately Polish troops, but they're going in looking like mercenaries and not using their flag. They're going in small units that'll probably get annihilated, like the Polish mercs that went in. It was several weeks ago. They got hit by a cruise missile strike and it killed a large number of them. I think it was like 80 or so, something around that. The news comes and goes. I try to keep some of the details in mind, but it's hard to. But anyways, Poland's trying to tiptoe in there. They send in a few battalions that looking like mercs, with American-made stuff. They're trying to go into the Donbass area to help out there, and that's a bad move. They're going to get annihilated because right now that area is falling apart. Russia is literally ground those forces down to the nub. Like, they don't have very many heavy weapons left, and what few heavy weapons get into that country are easy pickings, as Russia now has, and has had full air superiority over Ukraine. I mean, it's undeniable. It's indisputable. They've been hitting everywhere in that nation with tactical ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and also occasional raids from strategic heavy bombers or bombers that fire standoff cruise missiles too. So there's not anywhere in that nation that's safe from Russia. There's no strategic depth by which the West has a way to have a safe place to operate behind, to muster forces, to, gather equipment. Everything in that battle space is being hit by cruise missiles, by tactical ballistic missiles, by strategic aircraft going in on bombing raids, or strategic heavy bombers doing bombing raids, like those that dropped the FABs, the KAB 500 thermobarics in Mariupol. So, there's no place that the Ukrainian armed forces are safe, and you best believe it's scaring the hell out of NATO. And that takes me to my next topic, was the whole WEF thing, the whole Davos thing. Now, you had people like Kissinger in there talking, and they're talking like they know that they want to get out now. They want to get out now. Now they know they've lost, and this brings back the original topic that there is two separate sets of elites. There's the Eastern and Western elites, but I'm going to go into such detail about this tonight that I'm going to give you a whole nother perspective by which to look at these things, okay? So, essentially what that means is that, they're trying to bow out gracefully because they know they've failed. There's not one thing they can do in that land that's going to make a difference. They send a few dozen howitzers, they get destroyed, or they get identified by, Russian counter battery radars, and then they get hit by counter battery fire, or they get carpet munition by a strategic bomber, or they get attacked by a ground attack aircraft. There's nowhere that heavy equipment inside that country can operate safely on the Ukrainian side. So what they've done is they've ground those forces down to the nub, to where they're basically a light infantry force. And even a lot of the anti-tank weapons that were sent are failing, evidently, because the power packs are 30 plus years old. They're not fully even charged, like the wire-guided tow systems, and even some of the javelins themselves have been failing. So, all in all, the West has not been able to do anything effective to turn the tide against Russia and the East. So, at that WEF meeting, there were admissions among the speakers that all is not going according to plan. Well, gee, because you wanted to tear down your own power base, but you have the Eastern elites not cooperating. Now, it gets better. So, at this meeting, you had people like Soros visibly irritated, saying he wants Putin's head on a platter. That'll never happen. But here's the other thing. Although officially the CCP wasn't invited, although the Russians weren't invited, guess what? The CCP had a way of spying on their rivals, the Western elites, at this meeting, because they sent the president of Alibaba, a Chi-Com Amazon equivalent, okay? So this guy is basically a de facto agent of the CCP, because in Red China, the CCP runs everything. Whether even it's a quasi-private company or not, the CCP runs everything that's in China. So this guy in there, this president of Alibaba, he's in there egging these guys on, right? He's telling them, oh, yeah, do your carbon stuff. Yeah. You know why? Because it kills our economy and it makes it easier for China to come in and take over. People don't understand that even with this whole entire treaty thing that's being discussed, and yes, I'm going there. I'm talking about this treaty. People don't understand that the United Nations has been largely subverted by the CCP. And the UN as it stands now won't exist much longer because the Western nations are going to be conquered by China and Russia and their allies. There will be a new reconfigured UN. But as of right now, China is using the UN as a tool to shape the battlefield. And what do I mean by shaping the battlefield? I mean they're going to use it to further weaken us however they can. China has their tentacles in everything. People don't understand. And let me tell you something else. The CCP doesn't give a rat's ass about the West, its leaders, or it's banksters that run, or the elites that run the leadership of the West. They don't care. They don't care about any of them. And the CCP is only about the CCP. The CCP is only about their power, their control, their advancement. They're not about the West or its leaders. They could care less. What they are about is letting the West continue to rip itself apart. And they use our own institutions against us. And I told you all about that in the last live. I've told you about their subversion into American multinational corporations. I've told you how they have members of the CCP on all the major American corporate boards. Well, why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? I'll tell you why that is. It's because they are trying to help destroy this place. So not only are the Western elites committing suicide with doing in their own power base with their just their drug-induced high of a pipe dream of a great reset that'll never happen because it's going to fail because something else is going to come in instead, and it's going to be called the one world regime of Russia, China, and the other 8 kings and the Antichrist. There will be no great reset because the West won't even exist. The West will be overtaken by Russia, China, and their other allies, the other 8 kings. The West will be destroyed in World War III, and there will be no great reset. Not the way the West wants it. It'll be something else, and it'll be a Sino-Russian world. It's so hard. It's so hard for the Western mind to comprehend that. But I'm telling you the truth. There's not going to be a great reset because the great reset is a Western elite plan, and the Western elites are going to be sacrificed because Satan eats his own. It'll be a Sino-Russian dominated world with their own system that they've already created their own separate economic system now. That's not a secret. Everybody knows it. Everybody sees what the ruble's doing. Everybody knows about the petro yuan. It's not a secret. So the West is confounded. And what I mean by confounded is that they're confused, they're lost, they're stymied. So they have no way out. They've already done the damage. And when you see things that say the world has only 10 weeks of wheat left, no, it's not the world. Russia just had their best wheat harvest in many years. It's not the world. It is the West. It is the West. The West will fail miserably. And that is why I do what I do. I want you all to survive. I want you all to navigate this. I want you all to get through all that's coming, because I'm trying to show you the correct perspective on all this stuff, you guys. I'm not just saying this stuff. I research, I deep dig, I connect dots. I'm an analyst. I'm an analyst by nature. And I research raw data, I research intent, I research all of it. Stats, capability, everything you can think of. And I combine it all to make a coherent, logical, rational presentation that nobody can leave not knowing what's going on. I make these in such a way that everybody can understand what's going on. These institutions, this stuff is being used against us. And if you don't think that the Chinese are purposely egging on the Western elites to continue destroying this place, because the Western elites are stuck-up, arrogant jerks. I mean, like, they don't even know they're being played. But like I told you before in other lives, they're imbeciles, all right? They're both equally evil, but in different ways. China is a cunning creature because, like it says in the Bible, the serpent is the most cunning creature of the field, the devil. He's the most cunning beast in the field. So China, the dragon country, the red dragon, the serpent, the winged serpent, the red dragon, they're the most cunning beast in the field right now. And they are the ones subverting things, and even Western institutions. They're the ones degrading things with influence on Western corporate boards. They're the ones degrading things with influence in the UN. Let me tell you something. Tedros is a CCP shill, an agent of the CCP. And who is Tedros? Well, let me tell you. He's the guy that heads the W to the H to the O. So this treaty is nothing more than a machination of getting this place to continue to tear itself apart, and it's only geared at the West. If Russia and China signed it, it was to use it against the West. Russia and China are never going to give up their sovereignty to anything that's Western backed or anything that has anything to do with the West. You will never see, ever, never, ever will you see Western troops or Western UN forces going into Russia or China. You will never see that. That is something you will never see. If that were so, then this entire thing that's going on in Europe wouldn't be happening right now. You wouldn't see the Russian economy doing well right now, because if Russia submitted to the UN, then you best believe a Western-led type of UN would have gone in there and screwed things up. So again, that's a logical, rational deduction. You know, you have to use deductive reasoning to figure some of these things out. So also, not only are they turning the UN on us, but they're trying to instigate issues here inside this country, inside Babylon. They want these things coming out because they want the populace angry. China shut their ports down to Western trade, but they still trade with Russia. Their economy is still doing very well. Just because a stock market says something isn't indicative of what the reality on the ground is. And we know that from our own stock market. When our stock market goes up, our economy is still in the shitter. So, you know, if the Chinese stock market even drops some points, that doesn't mean anything. It just means that, you know, they cut off trade to the West, you know, and there's things going on in Shanghai. Shanghai is their main hub for trade with the West, by the way. So if they shut down their ports in Shanghai, it was to hurt us. Like I said, they're very cunning. They're very slick how they do things. They're shaping the battlefield for the day they invade, okay? That's what all of this is about, all of it. And I'm trying to help people see that. People are seeing the different trees, but they're not connecting the dots, okay? I'm giving you a whole different perspective on this stuff. I'm giving you a real perspective on this stuff, a logical perspective, because the Chinese invasion and the Russian invasion coming is real. It is 100% real. The Chinese have their Trojan shock armies inside this country ready, as do the Russians. China lets the Russians post up on their CCP properties. You better believe it. They're here. They're here, and they're waiting. They're waiting for this place to be at its utmost weakest before they attack. Okay? So, again, this treaty has been subverted in such a way to where it's only going to hurt the West, and it's not going to hurt Russia or China or any of their partners. You will never see it geared against those. So whatever it says in the treaty, just think of it as only applying to the West, not to the world. There are two separate elitist blocks, and there's even non-aligned countries. There are non-aligned countries that don't take either side, but they're also gearing more towards the East because the West is isolating itself because it's arrogant, and its elites are arrogant. And it's causing a split, a bifurcation in the world. People are picking sides, and most people are going to go into the Eastern camp because China has already dominated many countries through its economic progress, through its One Belt, One Road initiative. Never forget that. Never, ever forget that. And its civil-military fusion policy allows for them to station troops on any CCP regime properties held in other nations. So that means, like I said before, that means ports become naval bases and logistical hubs. Cargo yards can become bases and logistical hubs. You can use farms as a FOB or a combat outpost, or you can even store logistics in farms. Ranches, apartment blocks become barracks. Private homes become barracks. Everything you can imagine with the civil-military fusion policy, all of it is possible. And it's not only possible, it's the reality. So people need to get an understanding and get a firm grip on that, because that is the reality. So when you see this stuff about this treaty, just know in the back of your head that the real purpose of it is to weaken this country, and even maybe the Western European countries, but primarily Babylon. So, along with that, I'll go into the funky box, and the funky box is nothing more than the marked and living nasty lifestyles, because the marked are giving it to each other, and they also have they have a whole cocktail of nasty things inside of them. But we all know that. I'm not really qualified to speak on health things, so I'll keep this short and to the point. The whole thing with that is it's a fear campaign. It's hype. If as long as you don't intermingle with the marked, you'll be fine, because those that do will probably end up paying the price, and it's a sad thing, but that's just the reality of it. And now I'll go back into my area about the whole China, Taiwan, and invasion goals of the CCP. Again, China boasts the largest military, including its reserves and its paramilitary, on the face of the earth, that nobody can hold a candle to. I've already told you in all the past lives how big they are. They have many, many, many millions. So at their disposal, they have the biggest navy, the biggest, most modern, advanced navy, and they do, because of all the types of equipment on their ships, the weapon systems on their ships, the radars, the computer systems, the targeting, everything they have on those ships, electronic warfare. They have the most advanced modern navy on Earth. They have the most advanced, and it's the biggest navy, and they have the most advanced combat air fleet. Although it's not their overall air force that's the biggest, but it's getting there, they have the biggest combat air fleet, because the majority of their aircraft are combat planes. And I've told you all how big it is before. If you take all their fighters, tactical fighter bombers, and strategic bombers, and combine them all, you have a grand total of some, let me see, I have it wrote down. Let me consult my papers. You have a grand total of, let me see. Here it is. You have a grand total of 2,392 planes. But when you add the additional 300 stored Q-5 ground attack planes, that number climbs to 2,692, which is almost 2,700 planes if you just round it up by 8. So their number of combat planes is immensely bigger than ours by about 1,000. Now, the PLAAF, the Chi-Com Air Force, has a grand total of 3,800 planes, but when you include their storage of their Q-5s that they had in storage, they still have active Q-5s, but they had 300 in storage too. They have they're 2,700 combat planes. They're 2,692. So the rest are support planes, like transport planes, fuelers, like mid-air refuelers, and such like that. They're AWACS and such. But they also have 440 naval aviation fighters and tactical fighter bombers too. So really and truly, if you take all the aircraft of China, and including their non-combat planes, they have some 4,240, and that's quite a large fleet just in total. And Russia has also quite a large air fleet itself. Although they don't have the number of combat aircraft that China has, they still have quite a lot, because they have the biggest strategic bomber fleet on Earth when you include all their stored strategic bombers. They have 1,931 combat planes, and they have 310 naval combat aircraft. China had 440, but Russia has 310 naval. Yeah, they're just both of those combat air fleets are immensely large. We only have, on the other hand, 1,797. That's our grand total of combat aircraft. So Russia has Russia has a little more than we have, and China has quite a lot more than we have. And both China and Russia have very, very advanced combat planes. Okay, excuse me. An example being like that I posted of that Su-47, also originally called the S-37 Berkut. And they have the MiG-41 and the Su-57, all stealth aircraft, with modern radars and targeting and everything else. So, um, I just wanted to say all that because, we're at the point where, if there was some sort of a conflict around Taiwan, that you would have basically the U.S. fleet would be sunk by the Chinese strategic rocket and missile forces. And why? Because China has carrier killer ballistic missiles. The DF-21D and the DF-26B, which is even longer range, out to 1,500 miles from the Chinese coast. And then when you add what they have on their man-made islands in the South China Sea, that extends it out quite a bit further. So there's no way in hell that the U.S. Navy can intervene to save Taiwan. Once war begins there, it's over. The CHICOM strategic rocket forces, missile forces, will bombard not just Taiwan, but they'll bombard the U.S. Navy with their carrier and large ship-killing missiles, which have cluster munitions as well as multiple reentry vehicles. So basically, the carriers would be gone immediately, and so would the large capital ships, like the like maybe some of the battleships that we have. I mean, not battleships, but you know what I mean, like cruisers and things. Some of the destroyers, things like that would be gone. They'd be gone. They'd be wiped. They'd be sent to the bottom of the sea. And China now has a bigger sub fleet than us too. And we saw what the French sub Saphir did. It sunk an entire carrier group in an exercise all by itself. And that was an old French nuclear attack sub, meaning it's nuclear powered and it carries torpedoes and such. If that sunk an entire carrier group by itself, imagine what the Chinese subs can do. They have 2 more submarines in their fleet than we do, and counting. They're due to have more produced before the end of the year, and that's about the time I see them invading. Oh, and I also, as I told you before in my predictions for the rest of the year, I told you that I see the entire fiasco in Eastern Europe coming to an end by July. It looks like it's really set to come true. So if that comes true, then my prediction was on the money based on all the data I consume and I put together. So again, I also see the food and fuel crisis really taking hold by mid to late summer as well, about the time the Ukraine thing ends. So we have a lot coming at us, and my predictions are all made on solid data. And it looks like the Ukraine one's going to come true right on time, right when I predicted, and the food thing as well. Because again, if they're saying we had 10 weeks of grains left, then that means that, see, grains feed animals. That's what people don't understand. You had a lot of slaughtered tongue twister. You had a lot of slaughtered livestock, and when you slaughter immense amounts of livestock, it is extremely hard to get them back. So we have dwindling meat resources. We have dwindling grain resources. And I had predicted, based on simple accounting math of our dwindling resources, that we would be basically bone dry on food by mid to late summer and bone dry on fuel at the rate that we don't produce fuel hardly anymore, if at all, and the rate that we have basically sucked dry and sold off our strategic reserves, which are made for wartime or emergencies only. But they took it in an act of supreme high treason, and they sold it off. So that puts us in such a place where you would have basically us running out of everything and internal collapse and conflict beginning sometime by mid to late summer. I predict that this place will become a very, very dangerous place by then, because that is when you will see a sort of a Syrian-style factional conflict erupt, and you will see many factions going head to head. And the puny, woke, depleted military that's almost, running low on ammo and everything else due to its due to piss poor decision making, they won't be able to really do much of anything. They'll be like Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Like they'll be like his regime. They'll only be able to hold down certain cities, and without outside help, it'll flounder. The only reason Assad won his civil war, I mean, he basically won it. The only reason why Assad and his regime won the civil war was because Russia intervened. Russia intervened and saved Assad. So did Iran and Iranian proxy groups. They intervened at the behest of Assad, and they saved him. They saved his bacon. And now Assad won his civil war with outside help. But when it happens here, you see, I'm going to make an entire scenario about this, like I did with my invasion scenarios, but I'm going to make a whole map scenario of this, and I'm going to put everything in it, all the details imaginable, everything from the factions and what they control to all the resources that are left that have dwindled, and how they affect operations and everything. Because without logistics, armies can't really operate effectively. I mean, basically, it would see our Air Force being grounded because they can't get the fuel to fly. They would only be able to do very few missions. You would see our Army being stuck in certain key areas like cities or even stuck on their own installations because they can't get fuel for their vehicles. You would see stuff like that, you guys. It's not hard to imagine. I mean, and then when you have food running out, you're going to have people deserting. You're going to have all sorts of stuff happening within the regime. And you're also going to see different factions getting really big and starting to control large turfs because they're going to be fighting each other over resources. And things are going to be in such a state of decay and such a state of chaos that this place will be a madhouse. It'll be a madhouse. It'll be a free-for-all. And that is when China and Russia will invade and mop up. They will simply mop up. It'll be easy for them. They will have minimal losses, very minimal losses, and only the smart will survive. So basically, you're going to have a situation like that, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The woke military is not big enough to hold down the whole United States. And I told you all before, with real numbers, real figures, real capabilities, that they're not big enough to do that. And they damn sure can't do it without logistics. I told you, even with just to run a checkpoint, I told you all what it would take, and you would have to resupply that place constantly. Well, when you don't have fuel to run your helicopters for resupply or your ground vehicles, you can't operate checkpoints. What are you going to do? I mean, look, if they don't have fuel, and because the strategic reserve's empty, they can't do nothing about nothing. All they can do is occupy their little islands, which will be these cities that they occupy, or their bases, and that'll be it. Everything else will be a madhouse. It'll be wild here. It's just the reality of it, and people don't understand that. Armies don't just do things. You need logistics. You need supplies. You can't just... An army doesn't move without supplies. It doesn't move without fuel. You need to have these things to operate. And if there's no ammo, you can't fight. I mean, how is the woke military, the woke depleted military, this garbage military we have now, how are they going to hold down the peace in such a situation when the nation is falling apart due to lack of food, lack of fuel? They can't. They cannot. This place will be crazy. You won't have any sort of police forces or anything because they're all going to go home and take care of their families. See, you're going to have towns becoming like self-sufficient to where they have to defend their own towns. You're going to see various factions arise. There's going to be a lot of neutral factions that are only there just to protect their communities, but you're also going to have factions that are more aggressive that want to conquer areas and take the resources. So you're going to have this type of stuff. This is reality. This ain't a joke. This is reality, okay? And I'm explaining it all to you and why it will be that way. Look, our military is small. It's tiny. It's not big enough. It's not big enough to occupy a nation this size. Only China could occupy a country our size with their ginormous paramilitary, their gargantuan paramilitary of 20 million, their reserves of 5 million. and their regular active military of 4 million. Only China could occupy this place. They have 29 million troops. We only have 1.6, 1.7 ground troops, and the rest of our forces are Navy, Coast Guard, and Air Force. So, and I'm talking about the entire 2.2 million combined. So all components, all branches. So yeah, only China could occupy the United States. Only they have the personnel that could do that. But they're also going to do it with Russia and with other smaller allies. Russia has a big military, but it's nothing like Chinese sized. It's not even close. No one is close to Chinese in terms of size. They're not. Nobody's that big. Nobody's even close to that big. China and Russia have about the same technology, but the only reason China's more powerful is they have much more equipment, a bigger industrial base, a gargantuan armed forces, including paramilitary, and their industrial base. The number of factories they have and the steel they produce is gargantuan. I mean, 1 billion tons annually. There's nobody that comes close to that. Their metallurgy abilities and their steel production and their other metal production puts them ahead of everybody. And with all the factories they have too, they can churn out ships, submarines, armaments, small arms, mortars, missiles, tanks, APCs, IFVs, and they already have so much of that stuff, you guys. They have more of that stuff than anybody. I've literally gone over each specific vehicle type and itemized it in order to come to the actual numbers of what they have. And I include in that, I include what was sold, if any were sold, to different nations and what was kept. And China has so much stuff, you guys. There's no one that can hold a candle to them. Not even Russia. I mean, Russia is close in the number of some of the vehicles, but China is so big. It's so big. It is the premier world superpower in real terms. Economically, financially, and their gold holdings. They have the biggest gold reserves. They're the biggest armed forces with their paramilitary included. They have the most weapons, the most armaments. They have the biggest factories and the most of them. They produce the most steel. There's nobody that compares to China. Nobody. They have the most shipyards. Their civil military fusion and Belt and Road policy has allowed them with cunning and stealth to dominate a lot of the world, mostly the third world. But they've been able to dominate those third world nations and basically turn them into satellite states through their Belt and Road initiative. And their civil military fusion policy allows them to use any place they own in those nations, and including our nation, as a staging ground for their military forces. And they do everything by stealth. All the Club Ks they've gotten in, everything they have that they've gotten in here, their troops, their equipment, their logistics, it'll all sit on CCP properties while the internal struggles are going on. And then when it's ready, when it's time, and they give their muster signal, they'll muster on those properties where they're at, because they're not going to come out while the internal conflict is going on. They're going to stay in those properties, and if anyone can somehow manage to get to those places, they'll be eliminated, of course. But during the internal conflict, communications and stuff will be iffy. The power grid will be iffy. I mean, running water will be really iffy. It'll be really hard to keep those things running, because in an internal conflict, how are people going to go to work when there's a bunch of violence going on and everything's chaotic? There's no organization. Everything's just, besides the factions, there's no organization. There's nobody going to work. It's dangerous in the streets. This place is going to collapse little by little by little, and it's going to get really bad. And by the time the internal stuff has gotten really hot, that's when China and Russia will come in hot, and they'll just totally flatten this place. There won't be really any real resistance to them, because everybody's been too busy going after each other. So really, the smart people are going to hold out. They're going to do the best they can. And then when it's time to flee to the wilderness, they're going to flee to the wilderness. And that brings me to my next topic of preparedness and the best ways to prepare. Now, in my stories, the whole purpose of my stories was to help you guys Learn how to navigate these things. I showed you the macro level, and I showed you right on down to the street level view of what the foreign invasion will look like. And by street level, I mean the personal character level views. I showed you what types of things would happen. I showed you how communities would be captured. I showed you the tactics. I showed you literally every conceivable angle. I showed you how logistics make an impact, how logistics affect operations. So I showed you what key areas the foreign forces would occupy. I showed everything. I literally showed you everything. And I'm being truthful and honest when I say nobody else has done the level of work into this that I have. I've not found anybody. I've literally not. I'm just being honest. I mean, I'm not boasting or anything. I'm being real about it. I've not found anybody else that has put that level of detail and work into the Sino-Russian invasion that's coming that I have. Nobody. So I'm going to do an audiobook to continue my work in that. And I'm also going to make you guys a very detailed Second American Syrian style conflict on a map. On a map. And I may do it as a live, you guys can comment on it as I do it. You guys might like that, Of course, it's hard for me to interact because I can't always see the chat, but, I just wanted you to know that was my plans for upcoming stuff on my channel. But anyway, back to the prepping part. I showed you guys in the stories how they fled to the wilderness. They evacuated. The first thing they did was evacuate. They evacuated human settlements. Even in the cities, like in the Phoenix story, they went underground. They evacuated underground, or they tried to find a way out of the cities before it got to be too late. And they couldn't do it because the cities were all cordoned. They were cordoned, and they were swept through multiple times. That's all. That's what urban warfare is. It's cordoning and searching multiple areas. You surround a neighborhood, you clear it. You surround another neighborhood, you clear it. You might surround a bunch of neighborhoods at the same time and clear them all at the same time. That's what urban warfare is, and it happens over and over and over and over until you've basically ground down any resistance. So anyways, you want to evacuate first. Evacuation is the most important thing. In the very first story, I showed you how they held open an evacuation corridor at Route 259. Route 259 led into the Ozark Mountains, into the foothills. And they used 259 to evacuate logistics like food and water, medical supplies, what fuel they could get, and everything else, ammo, all of it. They evacuated. They went and took it all into the mountains. Why? Because the Chi-Coms were first going after human settlements. That was their main priority, to establish FOBs in tertiary areas. By tertiary, I mean outlying areas that were away from their primary and secondary objectives in the invasion. They went out into these tertiary outlying areas, and they wanted to seize human settlements first, as most militaries do, and they wanted to establish FOBs for future operations. So they had logistical places, like the Broken Bow Municipal Airport. So they turned that into a FOB, and they went to seize the town. And as they were seizing the town, the partisans, the civilian partisan forces, which were made of ex-veterans mostly, but also people they led, held open a corridor of 259 for as long as they feasibly could before it just got to be too much, and they had to get out of there. They had to get out of there, and they lost a lot of people doing it. They lost tons of people doing that. But they evacuated the women, the children, the weak, the frail, and everything in between, the wounded, everybody. They evacuated everybody they feasibly could, and they got out of there. So evacuation is important. You need to be able to have an evacuation route. You need evacuation plans. Okay? That's a big part of preparedness. You need evacuation plans. Those stories and those illustrations I even made for the stories, all of it shows you what a sort of an idea of what this is going to be like. This is how it's really going to be, you guys. I mean, really. This is as close to the reality as it gets. And I'm trying to do that for you. I'm trying to offer that for you. I'm offering everybody something that really nobody else is right now. I have not found anybody just yet that's doing anything even remotely like this, showing people these aspects of what's coming. Now, it's up to everybody to go and view those things. I mean, it's up to you. If you don't want to make the time for it, then, hey, your blood's not on my hands. But if you do want to make the time for it, go and watch the documentaries. My Pacific Northwest one is more about terrain. It's more terrain oriented, whereas in the invasion, whereas the 96-hour invasion is more about different regions and different. I made that to show you the pattern of what it would look like. Different regions showing different strategic objectives being captured and what they generally will go after first and why. And I made that to show you all that. So it would give you an idea of what this will be like and look like and move like and seem like and act like and everything. I wanted to show you guys, I wanted to immerse you in that so that you get an understanding of the things that you need to plan for and integrate that all into your planning so you have an understanding. I'm trying to reach all the lay people that don't really understand military stuff, and I'm trying to get you all to understand these things. It's very important. And if you want to watch it. If not, then hey, that's on you. But I also made a review playlist for the stories to highlight important things that were in the stories. Some things are in there are going to save your life to understand, like sanitation. You need to understand logistics. You need to know at least basic tactics so you know what kind of things they're going to try and use on people. And maybe you can implement some of that for yourself if you have a small group. You can learn those things. I try to do the best I can as an educator. I see myself as sort of like a professor, but in this subject matter, okay? This is my subject matter that I excel in, and nobody can take that away from me. Nobody. So, of all the things, this is my niche. This is my area. This is what I excel in. Everything else, hey, I ain't no expert in nothing else, but this is my area of expertise, and it's very important to know how to navigate these things, okay? I'm trying to help you all. Legitimately, I am trying to help you all to get through this. You need to know how to cache away items you need for survival. And by cache away, I mean you need to have hiding spots for your supplies, your food, your water. You need to have at least 2 to 3 cache points at a bare minimum that are out in nature that can sustain you. If you keep everything in one central location, like your home, and it gets overrun by foreign troops or whoever, or it gets destroyed by foreign troops or whoever, guess what? You just lost everything you had. Whereas if you have things sort of spread out and you have hidden areas out in nature, you have places to go to dig up those things or wherever you hid them, and you have water and food out there to sustain you for a while. You have ammo. You have whatever you put out there, medical supplies, whatever. You need to cache things away, people. I hate to say that word. I hate using that word, people. I'm just being serious. It's just a serious, serious issue. This is very dire, okay? I'm trying to help you all because I know what it's going to be like. You guys need to have places in nature that you can hide these things that will sustain you, because guess what? You can only carry so much on foot, because if you don't have a vehicle, or if you did have a vehicle that somehow ran, you somehow had the fuel, you're going to run out of fuel eventually. You can only carry so much on foot, okay? So you need to cache things away in safe, hidden areas that only you know where they're at. That is a very important part about preparing for a foreign invasion or even an internal conflict. All right? So, on to the next thing. Besides that, sanitation, when it comes to field sanitation, you need to know how to dispose of human waste properly so that it doesn't get into the water table and give you dysentery should you have to use, water out in nature. You don't want to put that stuff in streams or lakes. You might need to fish out of a lake, catch fish to augment your food supply. You don't want to poison the lakes and the rivers with human feces and everything else. You need to learn how to have outhouses. You need to learn how to burn feces, like I showed you in my review playlist in the sanitation thing. That will prevent cholera. It'll prevent typhus. With the waste, with the garbage, typhus comes from rats that carry lice. Typhus is a louse-borne disease. And let me tell you, when society breaks down and things collapse, most Americans are going to let their trash pile up. They will. Mark my words. That is going to happen. And that is how people are going to get lice and get typhus. Because when there's no more trash services, you're going to have these things happen. You're going to have garbage pile up. It's going to attract rodents that carry these lice, and it's going to give people typhus. And typhus is deadly, okay? So you don't want to have, see, typhus is totally preventable. All you have to do is burn your garbage. You burn trash and you burn human waste, okay? You can shit in a plastic bag, and you can burn that. You can burn it. There's all sorts of ways you can get rid of waste that it doesn't involve putting it in the water supply or in the ground to where it can leak into the water supply and give you cholera or give you dysentery. And you want to burn your trash to prevent typhus, like in burn pits, like I showed you in my review playlist. Now, on to the next thing. So this whole thing, I wanted to cover this real quick with the formula. Something very wicked comes this way, or this way comes, I should say. This whole thing with the formula has very nefarious undertones, and I just wanted to quickly, before I forgot about that, I wanted to quickly warn people to be very leery of these types of things, because there are very dangerous things in foreign products, especially a lot of Chi-Com products that come here that they have lead and other stuff in that they're trying to poison Americans with. That you've already seen it with the pet food, how they've killed off a lot of our pets. I wouldn't put it past them to do the same with the formula. And that's just something I wanted to put out there before I forgot about it. There is something very evil behind that. So, they're trying to little by little tear this place apart. Make it easy for China to invade, and Russia, and their allies. So, this goes in more to the collapse. And when we have a collapsing food supply, the West, not the world, just the West, only has 10 weeks of grain left. So there's the food. Grain feeds livestock, so you can count on more livestock to be slaughtered. The grains go into breads and other things, of course, and we eat that. So the West is running out of grain, not the East. Russia has had one of their best harvests in a long time. So, and China has been hoarding food, and they can get grain from Russia. Russia is basically China's supplier of food and resources. So they can get all they need from Russia. Russia has had a excess harvest this year, and they're bragging about it. I mean, while the West is starving itself, depleting itself, you can't operate on empty stomachs. You can't run a nation on an empty stomach. You can't run a nation on an empty fuel tank. You need energy resources and you need food. So the East has everything it needs, not the West. So it's the West running out of grain, not the East. So anyway, on that note, that's going to lead into the internal troubles. When the food runs low, this is building up to my main topic. I'm getting there, you guys. I just wanted to discuss the American civil-style conflict in a little more detail and what will cause it. Now, the causes for such a thing is going to be the overreach of these Western elites on top of it's like a boiling pot of water that you try to hold the lid on. It's just going to boil over. So you have these Western elites basically clamping down. They're doing all these self-destructive things that do nothing but really get under people's skins and make life worse. You're going to have life get immensely worse for people. And then you're going to have the lack of food, the lack of fuel. Just all of it is going to build up to a collapse crescendo. And that is going to lead into these unstable people beginning to perpetrate acts of violence, and this place is going to become a madhouse, and you're going to see people click up into different factions, just like what happened in Syria, and they are going to be competing over resources and turf, because the woke military is going to be basically confined to bases that they're on, or to what few cities they may occupy. Like, of course, the regime HQ, the regime headquarters city, that's going to be occupied by the regime forces. But you're not going to have much of this country covered by the regime because the regime doesn't have the forces, and much of what they have is spread across the world. So, and they're going to be stuck there. They're not going to be able to bring them home. They won't have the fuel. I mean, to do a massive airlift of troops and what vehicles and weapons they had overseas, you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to do an airlift of all those people when you have no fuel to bring them home. So we're going to have a bunch of troops isolated overseas in pockets, and you're going to have basically what few are here, you're going to have them hold up in specific areas while large tracts of land fall to these different factions. Of course, you're going to have neutral factions that are just out to protect their communities and towns from these other factions, but you're going to have the more aggressive factions fighting over areas. And I'm going to show all this in great detail on a map. So I wanted to discuss that. The West is running out of resources, and the overreach of the Western elites is causing all this to happen. And of course, the foreign CCP infiltration and egging on of the West destroying itself is adding to it too. So now, my main topic. I just wanted to discuss how ultimately Western civilization will end, and the title of this is The End of the West, not the World. So the West, including Europe and Australia, New Zealand, and any other nations aligned with the West, are going to fall. They will be invaded. They will be occupied. The economies of these nations will fail because the elites have been depleting them in order for their Great Reset. But the Great Reset is going to be a failure because there will be no West left. The West is going to be invaded and occupied by Russia, China, and their allies. All of the West in World War III will be defeated. And the 10 kings will be the leaders of 10 nations, 10 victorious nations in World War III that the Antichrist will co-opt and form a one-world regime with them. The Western mind can't comprehend a world in which the West doesn't exist, but I'm telling you, the West is going to be invaded and destroyed and occupied, and the Western elites are going to be a sacrifice, and the CCP and the Russians and their allies are going to consume them. They will humiliate them. They will enslave them too. In fact, they'll probably get the worst treatment because they're rivals, like rival mobsters do to their rivals, how they put their heads in vice clamps and they make them eat glass and do all sorts of horrible, heinous things. Well, you can expect a lot worse from the likes of the CCP. The CCP has ugly intentions for their rivals, as well as they do for the people of the West. And I showed you there are Chi-Com troops in Serbia. Wherever they go, their God goes. And by their God, I mean little g God, the little g God, like Xi Jinping, their ruler. He is the head of a despotic, secular, humanist nation that wants nothing more than world domination. But even he will be flattered by the Antichrist. And even he will reign with the Antichrist for 1 hour, as will Russia and as will the other 8 kings of the other 8 victorious nations in World War III. But that notwithstanding, the Chi-Coms have troops in Europe right now. They have troops in Asia Pacific. They have troops in Iran. China is vastly humongous, militarily speaking, conventional military, and even their nuke arsenal is the 3rd biggest in the world with at least 1,000 nukes. And I've told you all how much fissile material they had in a live I did, I think it was 2 lives ago. I told you how much fissile material they have. And I told you that it's easily enough for 1,000. They have 1,000 nukes. They're adding more missile silos in Xinjiang and in Inner Mongolia, which is the northern central part of China. And also, they already had their original silos in Manchuria. They have road mobile ballistic missiles. China has a big nuke arsenal, but that's not the primary issue. The primary issue is their conventional forces are vast. They have troops in Africa, in Djibouti and the other African nations by which they have conquered via the Belt and Road. They've conquered through stealth, who they make now policies for. They decide what leader is in power there. They basically rule much of the third world because they've used their influence economically to do so. And they are the ones that are craving this world domination with Russia. There will be a Sino-Russian world after the West is gone. The West is over. It's over. Like Gonzalo Lira said, it's all over but the shouting, meaning that it's already set in stone, but all we're listening to now is the shouting. If you feel where I'm coming from, it's basically over. The West is over. The West is finished. It has torn itself down. These elites have no more chips on the table, so they have no militaries by which they can use as a bargaining chip to keep their rivals off their back, because they've weakened their own militaries. They think they're delusional and think they're going to ride off into the sunset with all that they stole, but they're not. They're not. They're not. Their Great Reset is set to fail. And they've even admitted that it's not going according to plan in their Davos meeting. They admitted such. So, you could see the frustrations. Their plans aren't going according to plan because China and Russia have stymied them. But yet, they're so arrogant and so stupid, they let the president of Alibaba come into their meeting. A Chi-Com company. And Red China is a despotic police state. You think that the president of Alibaba is not a member of the CCP? Think again. You don't get to be the head of anything in China unless you are submissive to the CCP regime. And the CCP regime will dominate much of the world, as will Russia. So, back to the military figures as I close out. This is my last part of my live here. I'm just reminding people what we're up against. As I said before, China, biggest, most advanced navy, 555 total vessels, 355 combat vessels, 200 auxiliary. Their paramilitary marine militia has 100+ ships in total because they can easily draft more ships. They can use any, according to civil military fusion policy. They have 100 ships that are at least passed down from the Chinese Navy, the PLAN, but they can also use civilian ships. And even the marine militia has bullied and intimidated the Philippines, and that's a paramilitary force. So China is very, very powerful, where even their paramilitary is formidable. Their regular military and reserves are even more so. The Russian Navy has 290+ vessels. It's in the neighborhood of like 293, 294, something like that. The U.S. fleet, its total fleet, including reserves, is 490. So China outnumbers us by a good bit, and combined with the Russian Navy, even more so. But China has the biggest, most advanced Navy by far. Like, no one can touch their Navy. No one can touch their combat air fleet. Their combat air fleet, with all the new, up-to-date, modern aircraft, avionics, targeting acquisition systems, missiles, electronic warfare, stealth, because they have now 2 different stealth aircraft. The J-31, which is basically a reverse-engineered but vastly improved upon F-22. And also, they have their first stealth aircraft, the J-20. They have the J-16, the J-15, which is a naval aircraft, the J-11, J-10, and the upgraded J-8s. They have the JH-7 ground attack aircrafts, Q-5s. They have even a, let me see here. They have a newer one that they've just produced. It's basically like a, I guess you would say like a Chi-Com F-16 equivalent in terms of what, capabilities. It's like a filler aircraft, but it's still pretty good. It's a very good aircraft. It's let me see here. The JF-17A and B. The JF-17A and B is a multi-role aircraft that is the equivalent of what the F-16 is, basically. So they have all these different aircrafts. They're all high-performing aircrafts, and they're all equal or greater to anything the U.S. can put in the air. And the U.S. won't be able to fuel much of its air fleet anyway in a future war because they got rid of our strategic reserve. They made our strategic reserve China's strategic reserve because they sold much of it to China and the rest to India. And now what little is left they're giving to Europe because of Europe's fuel problems that they caused on themselves with this entire fiasco in Eastern Europe. So now I go to the Army stats, and I'll wrap it up with that. The Russians have 12,500 main battle tanks, and their storage stuff is mostly in boneyards, so I don't include that. It's not like the Chinese storage numbers, which are kept at the ready status, but Russians still have a humongous tank fleet. They have 12,500 main battle tanks, 30,000 APCs and IFVs, 6,500 self-propelled guns, 7,500 towed, 3,300 rocket artillery, and they have 3.2 million military personnel, active and reserve, and they have 300,000 paramilitary. That is a big force, a lot bigger than ours. China now, they have... I got to get my paper out for them. Boy, they got a lot of stuff here. Oh, wait. Man, where'd I put that? Whew. Here it is. Let's see. Because I include all their storage and everything because they keep their storage at a ready status. They have 20,000 tanks, and that's including all they have stored away. I'm not talking about their stored for reserves, which was 3,000 storage for their reserves. They have another 10,000 in storage. They have 9,000 that are active with their active military. They have 35,000 IFVs and APCs that are with their active military. They have 4,000 in storage for reserves, with another 15,000 in storage, just kept in storage, readiness. I'm sure those would go to reserves and paramilitary. They have 4,300 SPGs, self-propelled guns, 3,200 towed guns, 3,300 rocket artillery, with 5,000 additional artillery pieces of all types. So that means they have the most artillery of anybody when you combine that additional 5,000 to what their active numbers are. They have 510 attack helicopters as of 2022. They have 50 attack helicopters in the People's Liberation Army Navy that are separate from their Army attack helicopters. We outnumber them on helicopters, but China is a very missile-heavy, very air defense-heavy, very anti-ship missile-heavy, very anti-tank missile-heavy force. So they have counters to all our attack helos, and they can swat them all out of the sky with impunity. So, yeah, it doesn't matter that we have more attack helos than they do. They can easily build more if they want to, but they just recently started to build more, and as of the last year, they've built over 100, which is phenomenal for 1 year's production. Yeah, their Navy, I already went over. Their Army's humongous, you guys. It's huge. And we, on the other hand, oh, yeah, I forgot their strategic missile forces. China has the biggest ground-based strategic missile forces, and if you're more interested in that, I have a video dedicated to that. It's short, sweet, to the point, and you can read the descript. It's back a ways in my playlist, but it's all about China, and then I have the Russian one right after that about their strategic missiles. And I acquired all the best data I could find in order to present that to you. So once again, I'm trying to be the best I can be for you all, and I hope you all appreciate that and enjoy that. And now to us, we're in big trouble. But yeah, on to us. Let's see. Where did I put that? Yeah, we are in big, deep trouble. I'm almost done, you guys. I just wanted to read our stuff real quick. If I can even find it. I have so much papers. Oh, Lord. Where did I put it? Ah, here it is. We have 8,330 main battle tanks in active service, with 400 in storage from the Marine Corps. We have 20,000 IFVs and APCs, and that's compared to China's, ginormous amount of like some 50,000 if you take all their storage numbers. We only have 20,000. Russia has 30,000. Only 1,055 self-propelled guns. I wonder how many we gave to Ukraine. Yeah, compared to like China's ginormous artillery force and Russia's big, huge artillery force. Yeah, we have 1,700 towed, 1,300 rocket artillery, and only 2.2 million personnel. So yeah, guys, that's the score. That's the score. We are in big trouble. The West is over. It will collapse. There's nothing that can stop it. All you can do is get ready to navigate it. I highly, highly, highly suggest you go back and review all my older material, my documentaries I diligently put together for you all, my stories I diligently wrote for you all, because I do care about people and I want people to make it. Simple as that. Simple as that. I want you all to navigate this to the best of your God-given abilities, and I want God to be with you all, and I want you all to get through this. I want you all to make it out to the other end, even though the other end is, going to be something else. But, I just want you to get through the parts that I know for a fact are going to eliminate a humongous portion of our world population, especially in the West. The West is, West is on the road to a steep decline in population, and I want you all to survive it. I want you all to make it. I do love you all, and I thank you all. And I just want you all to, make it out the other end. Please do read the stories. Please do watch the docus. I'm going to do my second American civil conflict docu on a Syrian-style conflict, what it looks like, what it'll be like, with all the details involved, including logistics, everything. And I also am going to basically do the audiobook story version, because I know some of you all don't like to read, and I typed out stories in my community tab that are a ways back, and it's easy for you if you have a PC or a laptop. It's a lot easier to scroll back and read those part by part, but if you don't, I know it's hard on a phone, so I'm going to do an audiobook to kind of convey all these ideas to you through an audio storytelling book based on my real combat experience in Iraq, blended with all the capabilities and stats and figures and facts of our enemy and what they can do. And I'm going to try and make you guys the best presentations I can make until they take me off the air. I'm surprised they didn't take this show off the air, but I wanted you guys to see it from a whole different perspective and see what's really behind all this stuff. There is two different syndicates, and they're duking it out right now. So, but one is going to lose drastically, and that's the West. So may Yeshua bless and keep you all always. I love you guys. I hope this was good for you as it was for me. You all be blessed.